Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going on a deep dive
Yeah.
into some pretty fascinating claims
Oh, yeah.
about hidden meanings in the Bible.
Hidden meanings, always fun.
Specifically, we're going to be looking at
Right.
numerology and symbolism
Okay.
as presented by a YouTube channel called Video Advice.
Video advice. Okay.
All right, so
Yeah.
our main source here is
Is a video.
a video
Yeah.
titled Bible Translator Reveals Shocking Information.
Ooh.
Pipe.
Yeah.
The Bible does not talk about God.
Wow. That's a bold title.
With all caps.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the title itself is certainly attention-grabbing,
For sure.
and it sets the stage for a very unconventional perspective on biblical interpretation.
Well, definitely unconventional.
So tell me more about this perspective.
Okay, well.
What are the big ideas here?
The video's central claim
Okay.
is that the Bible uses numerology as a kind of secret code
Interesting.
to conceal these deeper spiritual truths from those who only read it literally.
Okay.
So, for example,
Right.
they highlight the frequent use of numbers like 3 and 7 and 42, all of which they link back to the number 9.
Oh.
9 is kind of their...
So they're seeing patterns in the numbers.
Yeah.
But how does numerology even work?
Well, so numerology is this idea...
Right.
It's this idea that numbers have symbolic meanings
Right.
and can reveal these hidden truths about ourselves and the universe.
Is this like a
It's been practiced for centuries
widely accepted practice?
in tons of different cultures.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
while its validity is definitely debated,
Right, sure.
it's a fascinating system of thought that can offer these alternative interpretations of texts like the Bible.
So they're using this ancient system
Yeah,
to decode the Bible.
pretty much.
And you said they keep coming back to the number 9.
Yeah.
What's so special about that?
So the video assigns a very specific meaning to the number 9, human consciousness.
So they're arguing.
Basically, they're arguing that the Bible is not so much about a literal God
Interesting.
as it is about the evolution of human consciousness.
Wow, that's a bold claim.
It is.
So how do they even connect the number 9 to human consciousness?
Well, they give
Do they give any examples?
specific examples.
Right.
Like, for instance, they point out that the numerical value of Adam in Hebrew is 9.
Oh, okay.
They connect Adam to the earth, the flesh, the ego,
Okay.
all concepts related to human consciousness in their interpretation.
So they're kind of seeing
Yeah.
this hidden message about human nature encoded in the name Adam.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They also point to these biblical references to time periods like 3.5 years or 42 months or 1,260 days,
Okay.
all of which reduce to 9 when you add up their digits.
Interesting.
They suggest these seemingly unrelated passages
Mhm.
are all fundamentally about human consciousness,
Right.
hidden in plain sight within these numerical patterns.
It is like they're saying there's this
Yeah, almost like a secret code
a secret code.
that you can use
Yeah.
to reveal all these connections between different parts of the Bible
Mm-hmm.
that might not be obvious at first glance.
Not obvious at all.
Okay.
It's like there's this whole other layer of meaning woven into the text,
Right.
and it's accessible through the lens of numerology.
So if 9 represents human consciousness,
Yeah.
what does that say about
Okay.
their interpretation of other biblical concepts?
Mm-hmm.
What about something like the beast from the book of Revelation?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Instead of seeing the beast as a literal being, they interpret it as our lower kind of carnal mind,
Okay.
represented by the number 666.
Right, of course.
They arrive at this interpretation
Okay.
by adding the digits of 6666,
Mm-hmm.
which equals 18,
Right.
and then adding 1 and 8 to get, of course, 9.
So they're not talking about some external demon.
But an internal struggle within our own minds.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this reframing leads to a very different interpretation of salvation.
House.
The video argues that salvation is not about going to heaven,
Interesting.
but about achieving a higher level of consciousness.
So it's less about an external reward
Right.
and more about
It's an internal transformation.
this internal transformation.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And they use numerology to support this as well.
Oh, of course they do.
They point to the 144,000 saved in Revelation.
Right.
While this number is often interpreted literally,
Mm-hmm.
the video suggests it represents an endless quantity.
Okay.
But when you add the digits, 1 plus 4 plus 4,
Right.
you get,
You get 9.
once again, 9.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, they're seeing...
It seems like they're seeing the number 9 everywhere.
everywhere.
And connecting it back to this idea of human consciousness.
Absolutely.
So they apply this same lens to biblical stories,
Yes.
often with very unconventional interpretations.
Very unconventional.
What?
For example,
Okay.
they take the story of Jesus instructing his disciples to cast their net on the right side of the boat and interpret it as an allegory
What?
for focusing our energy on the right hemisphere of the brain, the seat of creativity and intuition.
They're reading that much
Yeah.
into the right side of the boat.
They are. They
Oh.
see it as this coded message about accessing a higher state of consciousness.
I see.
And you guessed it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a numerological tie-in.
Oh, there is.
They highlight that the disciples catch 153 fish,
Okay.
add those digits together, 1 plus 5 plus 3, and you get 9 again.
This video really emphasizes the internal journey,
That's right.
the transformation that happens within us.
Totally.
It's not about external events or beings,
Yeah.
but about our own consciousness.
Exactly.
Ah.
And they find this theme reflected in a lot of other biblical stories and concepts as well.
Well, I'm hooked. Let's dive into some more of these interpretations
Okay.
and see what other hidden meanings they've uncovered.
Sounds good. They take on the story of Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark, okay.
Yeah.
Such a familiar story.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm guessing they see something more than just a literal flood and a boatload of animals.
They do, yeah.
Okay, so what's their take?
They focus on the fact that Noah takes 2 of every animal onto the ark.
Oh, interesting.
They connect the paired animals to the duality of human nature.
So, like, we all have a good side and a bad side.
Kind of, yeah. They're suggesting we all possess both like a lower and a higher nature.
So the animals become symbols for
Exactly.
different aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, but how do they even decide which animals represent which aspects?
So they draw on this distinction between clean and unclean animals,
Okay.
as described in the Bible. The clean animals represent our higher, more spiritual aspects.
Okay.
And the unclean animals symbolize our lower, kind of more base instincts.
So the ark itself becomes a vessel
Almost like,
for our internal world,
yeah,
carrying
yeah.
all the different parts of ourselves through the storms of life.
That's their interpretation.
That's interesting.
And the flood itself becomes a symbolic representation of this cleansing process.
Oh, okay.
The washing away of the old ego-driven self
Mm-hmm.
to make way for this new,
Right.
spiritually awakened consciousness.
This is really making me think differently about these stories.
Right.
What other stories do they reinterpret through this numerological lens?
Well, they also offer a fascinating interpretation of the story of Jonah and the whale.
Oh, Jonah and the whale.
Yep.
Always felt like a pretty intense story.
Yeah, for sure.
What do they make of it?
So they focus on Jonah being swallowed by the whale
Yeah.
and spending 3 days and 3 nights in its belly.
Mm-hmm.
They see this as a representation of confronting our shadow side.
Okay, so the whale represents our subconscious,
Exactly.
the darker parts of ourselves that we might try to avoid.
Yeah, precisely. They view Jonah's time in the whale's belly as like this necessary descent into darkness
Right.
before a rebirth into the light.
Okay.
This process of introspection and transformation.
And of course, there's that number 3 again,
Right.
which they seem to associate with new beginnings.
Yeah. The 3 days and 3 nights that Jonah spends inside the whale represent a complete cycle of death and resurrection.
Right.
A symbolic transformation
Yeah.
that leads to this new level of consciousness.
You know, this interpretation resonates with a lot of spiritual traditions
I think so.
that view floods as symbols of cleansing and renewal.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how this numerological lens adds another layer to that symbolism.
Absolutely.
A lot of ancient cultures associate the number 3 with completion
Uh-huh.
and new beginnings.
Yeah.
It shows up in mythology and spiritual practices all over the world.
Yeah. Oliver.
So it's not just about decoding these individual stories,
Right.
but finding these universal patterns
Yeah.
that resonate across cultures and throughout history.
I think so.
Is that what they're getting at?
Yes. I think they're trying to show that the Bible, when viewed through this specific lens,
Right.
speaks to this universal human experience of spiritual growth and transformation.
Okay, so they bring up some interesting points.
They do.
Do they address the concept of tithing at all?
That's a good question. They do.
Okay.
And their interpretation is quite a departure from the traditional view.
Oh, so what do they say?
They argue that tithing isn't about giving 10% of your income to the church,
Right.
but rather it's this symbolic act of surrendering the 10%
Okay.
that represents the carnal mind
Right.
to the 90% that represents God or the higher self.
That's a very different take on tithing than I've ever heard before.
Definitely a new perspective.
Is there any historical evidence to support this interpretation?
That's a great question.
Or are there other numerological systems that might offer different insights?
And it's one the video doesn't really address.
Okay.
It's important to remember that this is just one person's interpretation. And there are many other ways to approach the Bible and its teachings.
Okay, I see how they're connecting the dots with the number 9.
Yeah,
But I'm not sure I buy the whole secret code idea.
I hear you.
Couldn't these numerical patterns just be coincidences?
That's a valid point.
Yeah,
It's always healthy to be skeptical and to consider different perspectives.
right.
Some people might see these patterns as profound evidence of a hidden code,
Mhm.
while others might dismiss them as mere coincidence.
I could see that.
Ultimately, it comes down to individual interpretation and what resonates with each person.
So even if we don't accept every single interpretation they present,
Yeah,
this exploration is still valuable
I think so.
because it encourages us to think critically and engage with these ancient texts in new ways.
Exactly. It's about opening up new possibilities
Right.
and sparking our curiosity.
And even if we disagree with certain interpretations, the process of examining these ideas can deepen our understanding and appreciation of the text.
Hey.
It's like they're saying,
Right.
hey, here's a different way to look at things.
Yeah.
It's not about saying this is the one and only truth, but offering a new perspective that might lead to new insights.
Exactly.
And it highlights the fact that the Bible is
Yeah.
a complex text
Yeah.
with layers of meaning
Absolutely.
that can be interpreted in many ways.
It can.
There's no one right answer.
Nope.
And exploring different perspectives can enrich our understanding.
It definitely can.
This is all incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, my brain is doing backflips,
I know, right?
trying to keep up with all this numerology.
It's a lot.
But it's definitely fascinating.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, maybe we can take a step back
Okay.
and reflect on what we've learned so far.
Yeah.
What are some of the key takeaways you think our listeners should be considering?
That's a good question.
Well, I think one of the most striking takeaways for me
Yeah.
is how this interpretation shifts the focus from like external authority to internal transformation.
I agree.
You know, it's not about blindly following the rules or waiting for a savior,
Yeah.
but about taking responsibility for your own spiritual growth.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
This interpretation really flips the script
It does.
on these traditional views of salvation
Yeah.
and religious practice.
Totally.
It's less about dogma and more about self-discovery.
Exactly. It's almost like a self-help manual disguised as an ancient text.
And it really makes you wonder
Yeah.
how much of our understanding of the Bible is shaped by the lens we choose to use.
Totally.
Do you think there's a danger in taking any one interpretation,
I think
even this numerological one, as the absolute truth?
it's important to approach any interpretation,
Right.
whether it's traditional or unconventional, with a critical and discerning mind.
Be open to new ideas,
Yeah.
but also be willing to question them
Absolutely.
and weigh the evidence.
Yeah, you don't want to just...
It's about finding that balance
Right.
between being open-minded and also being critical thinkers. We don't want to just blindly accept everything we hear,
Right.
but we also don't want to shut ourselves off from new perspectives.
Exactly. And I think that's where the real value of this deep dive lies.
It's not about convincing everyone
Right.
to adopt this specific numerological interpretation,
Yeah, it's not about that.
but it's about encouraging people to think critically and engage with these ancient texts
Yeah.
in a more active way.
In a more meaningful way.
It's about asking questions,
Yeah.
not just seeking answers.
Absolutely.
It's about recognizing that there are layers of meaning to be uncovered
Right.
and that our understanding can continue to evolve
Yeah.
as we explore different perspectives.
I agree.
So for our listener who's maybe feeling a little overwhelmed
Uh-huh.
by all this information,
Right.
what would you say is the most important thing to take away from this deep dive?
The most important thing to take away from this
Yeah.
is don't get bogged down in the details.
Okay.
And don't feel pressured
Right.
to accept any one interpretation
Right.
as the absolute truth.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
The real value's in the journey,
Right.
in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
process of exploring different perspectives
Right.
and challenging our own assumptions.
It's about keeping that spark of curiosity alive. That desire to learn and grow
Yeah.
and understand the world around us,
Wow.
even through the lens of these ancient texts.
Exactly.
Well said. This deep dive has definitely opened my mind
I'm glad.
to new possibilities.
Yeah,
And it's given me a fresh perspective
that's great.
on some familiar stories.
Good.
So before we wrap up, is there any final thought,
Let me see.
question, or challenge you'd like to leave our listener with?
I would simply encourage them to keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Keep exploring. Never stop seeking deeper meaning in the world around them.
Whether it's through the lens of numerology or history or literature
Yeah.
or any other field that sparks their curiosity, the journey of discovery is its own reward.
That's a great way to put it.
That's a perfect note to end on.
All right.
Thank you so much for taking us on this deep dive
Pleasure.
into the world of biblical numerology.
Of course.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on the deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this unconventional exploration of hidden meanings within the Bible.
It was fun.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Keep diving.